Good evening, Tammy. How are you?
I'm very well, Tom. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. And Hayley, good evening to you as well.
Good evening, everyone. Hope you're well.
Good evening. So we've just done a little bit of a brief kind of overview as to what we're going to be getting up to just after the news. But for those that might be new watching us here on social media, so hello to our Facebook, Twitter and YouTube family. We are going to be looking at, towards the end of the show, we're going to be looking at different awareness days that have been or some that are coming up, and also giving a bit of insight as to what you can expect in next month's Healthy Minds. Before then, something that Hayley's very much looking forward to, we're going to have some guided imagery by Tammy. We're going to hand over the whole station to Tammy for just after 10 o'clock to help you find maybe a technique. Am I right in saying this, Tammy, in making someone be more mindful and less mindful? Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, it is. It's just about helping people just get in the moment and to relax and to become physically and mentally relaxed.
Amazing. So I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be round about 10 o'clock. Before then, we've got Tai Chi Frank joining us to talk about the benefits of Tai Chi. And so if you've got any questions or any queries for Frank, he's joining us in about 15, 20 minutes time. But before then, Hayley, I'm going to pass over to you first because we're going to be looking at tips to well-being. Hayley, to you, what does well-being mean?
See, I have a slightly different view on well-being because we do a lot of searching for well-being outside of ourselves. We do a lot of self-care, looking for things and people to help us with our well-being. But for me, it starts from the inside out. So there's things that people don't really consider part of well-being. And I would consider things like values. Now, people don't tend to think about values when they think about well-being. But when you do that deeper work and you connect with your values, it's easier to discover how to practice well-being in a way that suits you.
Oh, I like that. And of course, back in January, we did talk about when we were setting resolutions or your equivalent. We had Carl on the show as well. We were talking about identifying your values. So if you want to listen back to that conversation, that's still available at purewestradio.com. Do you know what? I've never actually considered linking that sense of well-being to our values and actually living in line with them. So that's really interesting about looking inside yourself. Tammy, what's your view on well-being?
Well, firstly, I do agree with Hayley. And it was a really good topic when we discussed it back in January. For me, well-being is just keeping mentally healthy, physically healthy, emotionally healthy. And looking after yourself, because when you look after yourself, you've got all the resources to look after other people.
And so there's two things there, isn't there? So we've got Hayley there that was talking about looking inside, and then Tammy, you've taken it one step further, looking inside, looking after yourself, but also other people. So there's that living with congruence with yourself in line with your values. So making sure that you're aligned with who you actually are, which means you can turn up better for those around you. Is that part of well-being, or is that undue pressure? Hayley, what are your thoughts on that?
I think you have to. We live in such a culture where it's look after other people, and particularly if you've got caring roles anyway, parents, or, you look after your parents, you're a parent yourself, or you've got siblings that you have to look after, or family members. It's very hard to fit time in to look after yourself. And I think if you can, no, I'm going to change that, prioritize yourself, then everything you do aside from that is easier and better.
And that, because a lot of people, they get confused with this notion of selfishness, where we're brought up to believe that selfishness is 100% always bad. But looking after yourself is for those that are watching, you can see my flying fingers here are selfish things. But actually, you do need to look after yourself to be able to look after other people, Tammy.
Yeah, absolutely. You think about, the cliches, you can't pour from an empty vessel. You need to put yourself first. You need to have the resources to look after other people. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to give the best of yourself, which again is going to have an impact on mental health.
Yeah. And well, we're trying to look after our mental health. It does peak and trough. It goes up and down. It's not a solid state of matter, but there are certain things that we can do to help kind of look after it. And well, we've got some tips to well-being, haven't we? I'm going to stick with Tammy on this one.
We do, and there are lots of resources out there to show you those tips that you can access. For me, if we look at the top 5, the first one would be to find time to relax. Find time to relax and look after yourself. We live in such a busy world where we kind of go between being mindful with just a single L to having a full mind. And we can get so absorbed in our day-to-day lives that we don't actually stop in the moment, in the present, and to recharge and refocus. So for me, top tip is finding time to relax, whether it's 5 minutes reading a book, whether it's a bath, whether it's going for a walk, it's just having that time for you.
Yeah, Hayley, what are your thoughts on that one as a pivotal well-being tip of finding time to relax?
Yeah, definitely. Finding that time is at the end of the day, it can only take 5 minutes sometimes. I'm going to go a little step before that and say to give yourself permission to do that, to allow yourself to do that. Say, yes, this is okay. Put it in your calendar. Tell people this is my time. Get up a little bit earlier, but protect that time and tell people that this is my time to self-care. And once I've done this, I know I'll happy to help you with your stuff.
But I think really important, just jumping in there.
Because there's some people.
Sorry, Tom. It's just that you can't compare yourself to other people. So what somebody does to relax in their time, whether it's to do a puzzle or I don't know, go for a run, might not be how you relax. And we've touched on this before. So you can't compare yourself either, because that will just generate anxiety.
Yeah, agreed. I think it's awful hard to in a world where comparisonitis is huge with social media. Everybody's looking. They put these images out of a perfect life, of a perfect lifestyle. It's easy to get swept up in that, but as we talked earlier, being congruent with who you are and doing what makes you happy and makes you relaxed it'll make the whole host of difference.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think I got cut off there a little bit, but I was saying there about that, giving yourself permission to. Well, a lot of people think, oh, as soon as I put it in my calendar, it's no longer a relaxing time, and then you've got that whole thing of boundaries. Then, where you've put something in your calendar, which like my calendar is full. My calendar literally says when I do take my time off, when I do kind of even essentially have like a snack before doing something else. But some people find that way out there, and then once you put it in your calendar, all it takes is for someone to message you to say, oh, do you mind doing that for me? But you do need to be strict with those boundaries, don't you, Hayley?
Absolutely, because people will take for as long as you're given, and time is so precious, and yet we don't value it that much. So if it's in your calendar and you've let everybody know and they're still pressing you, then they don't really care about your boundaries. So if you be aware of that it's your job to set the boundaries, to flex them if you need to flex them, and need is a big word there. But you don't have to flex them either.
Yeah, you could just be. And then Tammy, for those that have been maybe givers and they've been people pleasers for a long time and they're thinking, no, actually, I'm feeling overwhelmed with how much people are requiring my time. Do you have any tips to kind of increase that strength and that fortitude?
Well, no, again, I think it just comes back to being able to say no and feel comfortable saying no. And again, the more that we practice saying it, the easier it becomes. And when we have time for ourselves, again, it doesn't have to be the whole afternoon, because time is precious and we do juggle and we have to get that work-life balance right. So even if it's not actually set in stone in the calendar, as long as you know and there's an intent and in clarity that you are going to do something for yourself in the day at a certain point, then you're going to not put so much pressure on yourself. But I do think being able to say no, it's a selfless thing to be able to say no.
Yeah. So that was looking at relaxing then as a tip for well-being. Tammy, what other tip have you got on the tip of your tongue there?
Oh, to connect with others.
Hang on. You've just told me that
I know.
I need to throw people out. I need to have my strict boundaries, and now you're saying welcome them in. Explain yourself.
Right, don't have to do all these 5 tips all at once. You
Okay.
can space them out. But with being jokes aside, we are social creatures. We do enjoy interacting with one another. It's that social interaction, as long as it's done in a positive way.
Yeah.
Being with like-minded people. And it doesn't have to be all the time, because solitude's quite nice. But it is that connecting. So with a neighbour, a family member, a friend, just because we work better as a tribe than we do on our own sometimes.
And you've just taken a word that I was going to put to Hayley there, but that importance of finding your tribe. How important is it, Hayley, to find people that resonate with you on more than just you happen to be near me at this time?
I think those encounters with strangers are great sometimes, because you can offload and then leave, and nobody will ever repeat what you said. But yeah, being able to connect with the right people, again, is back to that boundaries, isn't it? Is having those people that will support you, that if you want to go and do something, they're going to cheer you on. And it's not something that we do. I talk about friendships and with children, and I talk about risk assessing. That sounds really formal. But when you start asking the right questions about the people coming into your life, again, it changes the friendships that you create.
Yeah. Definitely. We're just going to take one step back, because Helen Marie's been in touch on Facebook. We need to normalize saying no without giving a reason and without being judged for saying no in the first place. And it is true. No is a complete sentence. That not everything needs to be no because. Isn't that right, Tammy?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, the more that we practice saying no, the easier it becomes. And it's about looking after ourselves. No, I can't do that because I'm committed to this. No, or just no, as Helen Marie said. Just no.
Yeah, just no. And then there's that fear of missing out, which is something that we talked about in January as well. There's that there's that guilt that comes with it. Hayley, do you have any tips for anyone that really struggles on an emotional level to say no to them around them?
Yes, I do. And this is real. I find this is a way of particularly when you're starting off saying no. If you're not used to saying no, this is a good way to think about it. Who is missing out while you are giving your time to somebody else?
Oh.
And when you start to realize that when I'm giving 3 hours to somebody else, my children are missing out, or I am missing out time with my partner or my family members, then you start to look at no as your friend. It really does change the way you view no.
That's a great technique. So if I say yes to this person, who else am I saying no to without actively saying no? That's really powerful. Tammy, what are your thoughts on that?
I really like it.
Yeah.
I really like it, like that just flipping it.
I like that. I think that's those people that, because it's so easy when someone's either face to face with you or they've got you on the phone and they're straight away, can you do this for me? And you think, oh, well, I can't say no to their face. But then you have to think in that moment, well, if I say yes to this, who am I saying no to in like where I'm supposed to be going? That's really great. And it gives you that justification in and of itself. And we're like, no, I can't, because I've already allocated this time for other people. That's fun. I like that a lot. So when you're in that situation, give yourself a count to 3 or 5 when anyone asks anything of you. Don't just react and be like, yeah, of course I'll do it. Give yourself some time to think, actually, what's a consequence of this? And is it something I'm happy to let slide ultimately? That's fantastic. Now we mentioned, Tammy mentioned earlier, whenever people like this show now, we're condensing essentially a month's worth of mental health into 2 hours. Whenever you read certain books that might be titled as self-help, you read all of these things in one go and it can be overwhelming. But just to reiterate, these tips, they're not to be done all at once at the same time. But Tammy, do you have another tip for us that people could look at to try and increase that sense of well-being that they have?
Yeah, I mean, it's again, it's looking after your physical health as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that when we engage in positive activity, we benefit a lot from it. And again, physical activity, that physical health, it doesn't have to be massive things like go and run a marathon. It is something little, whether it's yoga, whether it's going for a walk, whether it's just moving from one room to another. Being physically active is going to make us have fitter minds. And that's a good thing.
That is a good thing. And Hayley, Tammy's just said there, it doesn't have to be a marathon. It doesn't necessarily have to be anything that's overly strenuous either, does it? It just needs to be some form of movement.
Yeah, something you enjoy. I've tried running twice and I've broken my rib and my back went into spasm. So running is not for me. That was my big lesson. But doing something that clears the air, just gets you up out of your seat, whether it's walking up the stairs, it just makes you feel accomplished, particularly if you set those smaller goals as well. So not expecting yourself to go and, walk 3 miles when you haven't walked 3 miles in 10 years. Setting small goals and then you can tick them off and maybe achieve the 3 miles in, a month's time or 2 months' time. Or one thing I will say with physical exercise is there's a healthy tipping point. And if you are doing things because you want to do them by choice, that's great. But if you tip into need to do them, it's become unhealthy. So yes, to all these things, great. But if you need to do them to feel relief or in control in some way, or feel like you just need a distraction, then it's become unhealthy. Something to kind of, I'll use the formal word, risk assess as you're going through your days and your weeks.
Okay, so there's an extra element of awareness to have if you're thinking of looking at physical exercise. And it's funny that you mentioned marathon. If you are that way inclined, or you like people that do take on ultra challenges, I was Pure West sports presenter on a Monday evening with Eaton Evans and Morris is undertaking the London Marathon. And if you go back to that show, you can see where all the links are. You'll find that on our social media. But conversely, something that's a bit more lower pressure is something like, funnily enough, Tai Chi, which is very low impact. And we're hoping to be able to have a conversation with Tai Chi Frank very shortly, as it is coming up to 9:30. But before we wrap up and say hello to Frank, Hayley, I know that you found some other bits and pieces to do with well-being as well. Do you just want to give kind of a summary as to what you found?
Yeah, I think self-awareness is massive, isn't it, in all parts of mental health. And I think when we learn to be more self-aware, it allows us to change things we want to change. So just by becoming aware of our behaviors, our thoughts, our self-talk, the way that we feel, we can then decide whether we need to change things or not, or whether we want to change things or not. And I think that really does empower us to be more well and to practice things that will help us with our mental health and our well-being.
There you go. And Tammy, do you have any final thoughts on this particular topic?
No, but no, straight away I went to that then. I wasn't going to stop. It's all about it's all about finding things which are right for you, which don't create anxiety or any stress or that vicious cycle. It's all about just positive engagement, positive connections, looking after yourself, putting yourself first,
Yeah,
and not comparing yourself to others.
Yeah. And these are appropriate and applicable for things in your personal life, things at work. And in fact, I was going to mention, I had an email. Mind has got a mental health at work toolkit as well, where they also look at how you can be more mindful with 1L in your daily goings on. There's so much information, and we could probably talk about the whole show on this now that we've started looking at these tips to well-being. So we may come back to them before 11 o'clock. However, we have got Frank waiting for us. If you do have any questions, please do put them on the Facebook. We're here until 11 o'clock. And you can also email studio@purewestradio.com or drop us a message on the Facebook if you want to remain anonymous, or if you want to have a question answered in next month on the 13th of April. We'd love to hear from you, studio@purewestradio.com. We're going to take a moment now, though, and have a bit of Ed Sheeran before having words with Tai Chi Frank. So should we reconvene in a couple of moments?
Yes, we shall.
Sounds good.
We shall indeed. So here we go. We've got the A team. It's 9:32. Tai Chi Frank is next here on Pure West Radio.